So I just started the recording. I'd like to wish good morning and say hello to everyone who is just joined now. And I'm going to share my screen because there should be my slides. So give me a second. I'm going to run my slides. I also equipped by some graphical tablet. There's maybe some important pieces of knowledge I'm just going to maybe write down, yeah, on a canvas. Maybe it would be better. Sometimes it works better than only talk about it. So I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, about the recording, keep this in mind. Keep this in mind because it's better to ask your teacher to press the button. Yeah, I think that many of teachers at this faculty don't mind who will press the button, but it's better from the technical point of view because once the teacher is going to press the button, it's better. It is going to last till the end of the course and at even maybe 6 more months. So it's absolutely better. Okay, so can you see my slides now? Can you please confirm me that you can see my slides? Just the title slide of my slides. Sorry? It was there?
Yes, we can
Yes,
see it.
thank you. I didn't catch it, so thank you. Okay, guys. So hello to everyone one more time. Today's topic is I think one of the very important topics in this line of dental informatics line of lectures. And this lecture will be dedicated to some, let's say, very brief, very gentle introduction of evidence-based medicine. Because once we are going to talk about it, you'll see that this is a very, very complex term, very, very complex concept. And honestly, I would say that even me and myself, I'm just very surprised by some details about evidence-based medicine because this is something which is very complex. It's like I would say it's just a kind of science itself. It's like something like a, let's say, separate scientific field. Yes, evidence-based medicine. It's going to be relatively well separated from some, for example, let's say computer sciences, and because there are some specific and unique kind of problems. But still, it's very, very related to medicine and very, very related to informatics, and that's why I think that this topic is little lecture to this topic is also held in this course. So evidence-based medicine, I'm going to talk about this, but as I told you, it will be like a very gentle introduction. My name is Buship. I am just a teaching assistant lecturer at this at the Institute of Biophysics and Informatics, as my colleagues although are from this department, from this institute. I'm to be more specific, I'm just from the Department of Biomedical, since there is something like a working group, or yeah, just a working group of several guys doing statistics and doing medicine. Me personally, maybe that's why I just got this got this go to give you this lecture, because I got a degree in both in medicine, general medicine, and in statistics. Yeah, so MD in medicine and Master of Science in Statistics. And maybe that's why I just asked to give you this kind of lecture, which combine both of medicine and some a little bit of computer sciences and a little bit of some informatics, let's say science of information, rather a bit of statistics and so on. So it's like a very complex topic, very complex, mixing many concepts and many, let's say, ideas from let's say distinguished part of let's say some let's say subjects like, yeah, as I do, computer science, medicine, and so on. I also do my PhD study at the Department of Biomedical Statistics, Faculty of Biomedical Engineering at CTU, Czech University in Prague, started in Kladno. It's just a small town, rather small town in western in west from Prague, maybe 30 kilometers, but it's like a kind of part of Czech Technical University. So we are going to talk about evidence medicine, and so for the very beginning, you know, when I got this task to give you this lecture about evidence medicine, I just searched from some materials how this topic is usually taught at the Western universities, let's say English Western universities, and I have to say that it's taught in many various ways. So it means that there is, for example, no like one well-established textbook such that all Western world is using this textbook. No, there's nothing like this. Also, the concepts and, for example, approaches how to teach this are very, very different. Vary across all the countries, all the universities, and so on. So I just try to pick up some, let's say, or extract some important pieces of knowledge, and this is what I'm going to talk about for this evening or this afternoon. And yeah, so for the very beginning, I'm just going to introduce the term of evidence-based medicine. This is like I will just start with some, let's say, formal definition, but it will simply just to kick off somehow, and then we'll be going in some more applied stuff, I would say. Yeah. So because the term of evidence-based medicine is so much complex, I would say that it combines several different topics or areas, and I would also say that maybe these areas for your first impression, it could be so they for your first impression could be that, for example, they are not so much related one to each other, yeah, but in fact they are. And another important piece of knowledge, piece of information you should know about is that we have this lecture, and we will have also one more lecture after 2 weeks. Yeah, so the next Monday or next Monday, it'll be just something like continuing of this lecture. So take this into account, and because I think that I'm just going to talk about maybe something even more interesting, or at least from my point of view, because I'm just going to talk about medical decision making, just medical decision making in clinical medicine. It means there's a bedside decision making. For example, you have a patient with some symptoms, patient with some you have some suspicion about some diagnosis, and we have to decide where to start. For example, where to start the diagnosis process, or how to, for example, make this process effective, and so on and so on. And this is based on some. It is very interesting. I think it's based on some statistical rules, some probability rules. Don't be scared about these terms. Yeah, it's critic to math, but mathematics. But don't worry. We are going only to skim over the surface, but still, there are these things are, from my point of view, very interesting. So I'm going to talk about, for example, some rules like Sutton law, or for example, cost benefit law, and things like this. So maybe you have heard about cost benefit law, and so on. And this is something which is usually applied in clinical medicine decision making. And this is what I'm going to talk about in the next month, or the next Monday. So in 2 weeks. So we are welcome to take part in the next lecture, which is a continuing of this one, and it will hold on. I will tell you the date. It will just I think on 13. Yeah, this December. 13th of December, yeah, 14th of December, sorry, 14th of December, 14th of December. So Monday, 14th of December. So you are welcome. But for today, we are just going to start with the concept of evidence-based medicine. Then I will just slowly move to clinical databases, because the evidence-based medicine is just a complex term, as I already told you. And if you'd like to apply the ideas of evidence-based medicine, or for example, daily routine medical practice, and I think that this is something which is supposed from your generation of medical students, that you are supposed to apply this as much as possible. Concepts and ideas of evidence-based medicine in your daily routine, and just simply daily based medicine, or medical practice. You should know about something about clinical classification systems, about Scientometrics, about designs of studies, because if you know something about these, let's say, parts of these pillars of evidence-based medicine, then you are able to, let's say, think a bit outside of the context, and outside of the, for example, and make, for example, some, let's say, consequences, or think about some consequences, thinking, for example, more in context of some, for example, not so much, for example, usual or common, let's say, ways. And all of this is important, yeah, not only for you but also for your patients. So I'm just going to I will try to make the context about this topics which could seem not to be so much related at this moment, but they are in fact very related. And on next Monday, I'll talk about the medical decision making, which will be maybe something like a even more interesting, from my point of view, even more interesting, and also combining some of the piece of information or piece of literacy I'm going to talk about for today. So this was about the content. I'm wondering if I'm able just to do it. We should do it in 1.5 hour. We'll see. I think that we can do it. So what is the evidence-based medicine? Just the abbreviation EBM. Usually, if you can see it, or yeah, you can see it in the context of medicine. Usually, the abbreviation or EBM stands for evidence-based medicine, and this is like a term which comes from Dr. David or Professor David Sackett. He's just a Canadian doctor, epidemiologist, professor of epidemiology. I think that he just, yeah, just one of the founder of evidence-based medicine and one of the most important guys in epidemiology of the 20th century. I know it's from McMaster University, Canadian University McMaster, from this one, I think. And he just, yeah, he's supposed to be maybe the most important one, because there were more than one founders of evidence-based, or all the ideas, like, because sometimes somebody told that, for example, John Virchow was already a founder of evidence, and you know that Virchow is maybe just a professor of medicine maybe 300 years ago. Yes, so, and he's also supposed to be founder of medicine, but I think it's a bit of like a, there is something like a jokey point in this, because definitely I think the evidence business is usually connected to some digital era, yeah, digital ages. So like Virchow, you know from anatomy, if you know him from pathology and so on. But sometimes it's also already is considered as a founder of evidence business. But David Alsager is just definitely founder of a modern evidence-based medicine, yeah, founder of modern medicine, and he told that evidence-based medicine is something like a conscientious, explicit, and judicious use of the current best evidence in making decisions about the care of individual patients. And I think that this relatively short sentence could really good, let's say, um, it's about the main let's say points about evidence-based method. Because early, what is important, or what is interesting about this sentence? Okay, this is about just best evidence. Best evidence is usually supposed to be stored in some sources of information, and this source of information nowadays, these sources are usually considered to be rather e-sources, like a digital based or online based or web embedded or something like this. So current best evidence. So if you like to use evidence-based medicine in your daily routine practice, it's good to know how to get to some up-to-date best evidence in medicine or in biomedicine. So this is the first important point is making decisions, decision making in medicine. This is also important because in the end, the final, for example, decision is simply up to you. For example, you can be, for example, provided by the best evidence in medicine. You can be provided by some good experience and so on. So you can, for example, some recommendations from your colleagues for and so on and so on. For example, by things like this. But still, in the end, the final decision is pretty up to you. So the decision making should be something which could be which is partly based on your experience, because experience is a good thing, definitely. Sometimes it's told that EBM, like evidence-based medicine, just goes against like a natural or native experience of physicians, of medical doctors. But this is not true at all, because of course, like your individual experience, absolutely important, because that's, for example, very similar to the process. For example, if you know something about artificial intelligence and you know something about neural networks, these neural networks are usually pre-learned or pre-built on some pre-learned models and so on. They could be, and it is something which could be, for example, which could be compared to your internal your own experience. Definitely, your own experience is important, but it's only a part of a successful and just a correct decision making. The other part is like a good literacy and good knowledge of medicine, and they should all be provided by the best current evidence, like up-to-date best evidence about the problem. Is also important. And about the care of individual patients, of course, we all are interested in the care of our patients. What is maybe the important word here? that is individual patients. Yeah, it's not like, for example, maybe you know that, for example, somewhere in the past, like during the 20th century, there are some not there are some different kind of regimes, like comrades regimes in, for example, Soviet Union and so on. The medicine was based on totally different principles. It wasn't like individual patient. It was about the individual patients. All the care was just done by some centralized decisions, and for example, all the vaccinations were like totally. It was like yeah, it was just, for example, it wasn't just allowed to for example, not to accept the vaccination, so on and so on. So it was just based on some not so much democratic rules. And what was in the end, the regime wasn't so much interested in individual patients. It was interested in some, for example, total success rate of success and so on, some epidemiology on some statistics, but not on individual patients. And individual medicine or personalized medicine is something like a kind of buzzword of today's medicine, but still it's something which is very important, because you know that, for example, many of the facts we have to study, for example, on up to our third year study. I think that many of the facts were just too much general. That okay, it could be somehow applied to, for example, some patients. Okay, it could be, but I think that before its application, you have to, for example, try to personalize them somehow to make them, for example, more efficient or something like this. And this is important, and this is also one of the idea of evidence-based medicine, that some of the facts, or many of the facts, should be firstly personalized and then applied for the patient. Like, you know, for example, sometimes, if, for example, maybe in the fourth year, I think there's just a pharmacology, and we are going to talk about the dosing of drugs and so on and so on. This is something which is which still works, yeah, the general dosing. But nowadays, for example, we are what's usually starting to be like routinely done is to measure some, for example, blood levels of these drugs, and to individualize, for example, dosing for individual patients. It's to be better, because you can, for example, make it much more efficient for a given patient if you like to, for example, measure the individual blood level doses of these drugs and so on and so on. So this is just one of the, for example, concept of personalized medicine. So we are interested in individual patients, not in patients like all of them are totally the same, because they are not totally the same. They are totally different. Well, so this is about a definition of the evidence-based medicine by Professor David Sackett. And I want to talk about some of these pillars. What is, because the evidence is based on some components, and what is important? Okay, clinical expertise is mostly based on what I've already told you. It's based on your internal experience, and this internal experience is important for you. And what is also important on this is that your internal experience, your own experience, you are going to get by years of your, for example, daily practice in medicine and so on. This is something which is which couldn't be so much easily shared, for example, with your colleagues. So each one of us has to get our own, let's say, clinical experience. So this is an important part of medicine. This is something which could be, for example, this is, as I told you, since it couldn't be so much easily shared, this is like something which could, for example, it's not so much easy to, for example, publish about this and so on. But still, it's important. Yeah, it's important. So as I told you, sometimes it's sort of evidence-based when it goes against this personal experience of individual physicians and so on. But that's not true, because clinical expertise and clinical experience is totally important, and it's one of the third basic, let's say, components of evidence-based medicine. Then what is, I think, evident is just best research evidence, or simply the up-to-date, let's say, cutting-edge evidence. Cutting edge, I mean, that's the top research, and for example, up to date, really up to date, which means what literature says, for example, up to date literature says towards the problem, for example, we are facing just at the moment. Well, and next, patient values. This is more connected to the individual or personalized medicine. Definitely patient values. There are some patient values, and this is also some, for example, change of paradigm, I would say. paradigm change, because maybe 50 years ago, 60 years ago, I think that this part of medicine was totally reduced, totally, because patients, there were some patient values, of course, but like the sentence, what the patient really wants. So, for example, if the patient, for example, have a choice, for example, just to, for example, just to decide, for example, some other alternative of treatment or whatever, or for example, patient could, for example, uh, cooperate on his or her on their own treatment. Yeah, these sentences, I think, these sentences were something which absolutely the absolutely it was absolutely like a taboo. It was taboo is, for example, this kind of problems that, for example, patient would, for example, simply want something, or for example, he would like to, for example, cooperate on the treatment or something like this. So patient values are emphasized nowadays, and this is something which also take into account for the today's understanding of evidence-based medicine. Well, and this is also like something which is usually connected to introduction of evidence-based medicine. It's like maybe I would just say that, okay, fundamentals. It's sometimes they call like a pyramid, or for example, a biology of scientific proof in evidence-based medicine, and this is a kind of pyramid. So I think that visually, for example, or that's just through the time, or maybe yeah, from for some let's say evolution of, for example, or literacy in medicine, usually go from the lower levels up to the top of this pyramid. So at the very beginning, there were some animal and laboratory studies, and still there are some animal and laboratory studies. But I think it's still get harder and harder to get, for example, some permission to give some to do some animal research, because you know there are some ethical committee, and if there are some, for example, um, let's say some kinds of procedures which are not so much friendly to the animals, then usually the ethical committee stops this kind of research. So I think that sometimes the animal usage are reduced a bit, and laboratories are still important, of course, but maybe they are reduced to some, let's say, traditional fields like microbiology, or maybe pharmacology a bit, or things like this, or so fields like this. But because sometimes it's told that science simply moves from like in vitro, you know, from Latin, what in vitro means, just from a laboratory glass, yeah, in vitro, from in vitro to in silico, and in silico means like in processors. In silico means simply the process of computers. So it's rather moved from some applied procedures and applied experiments on animals, rather to, for example, some simulations in computers and so on. But still, it works. No humans involved. Yeah. Then some basic kinds of, let's say, studies or designs are right. They are just okay. They have almost no design, like case reports or case series. You know, case reports, just sometimes also called casuistic, or, and you know from Latin, which what means casus, like a word casus in Latin. You know that casus is like a case, yeah. And it means also one case, one patient history, or one patient situation, or one patient diagnostical therapeutical process, or something like that. Case series is where we have, for example, 3 patients or 4 patients or something like this. So still a very limited number of patients. So if we have only 1 patient, or limited number of patients, we are not able to calculate any, for example, outputs of these studies, like, for example, statistical outputs, and the level of confidence, how much we can be confident about the results of these studies, they are not so high. These levels of confidence are not so high, because simply we are not able to calculate any, for example, a level of uncertainties or level of certainties within this kinds of studies. So this is simple about, for example, I would say it's just something like a story of 1 patient, or story of several patients. And okay, it could be, for example, reproduced somehow. It could be, for example, the treatment which was applied in 1 or more several patients of this kind of studies, case report or case series. It could be, for example, reused in some, for example, in your patient, if you, it could be somehow, but since the fact that some statistics or some validation of the procedures which were applied in these patients in these studies usually they're usually missing. That's why you should be aware before this application, for example, what is written in this case reports or case studies. So it's, for example, it's important to produce this kind of studies, because if we have many case reports, many case studies, we can try to make something which is called meta-analysis or systematic reviews of this kind of designs, this kind of studies, to make some generalization, which could be, for example, generalized in some way, which should be almost sure working. But yeah, the case reports like case series itself are not enough to be, for example, reproduced, and so don't feel free to, for example, reuse without any limitations the for example, treatments or diagnoses which were applied in some case report and case series, because it could work, but it's like rather a feed or substrate for meta-analysis. So I'm going to talk about it a bit later. Narrative reviews, expert opinions, editorials. Okay, still narrative reviews. The narrative, not non-systematic reviews. Narrative reviews are totally subjective. Yeah, they are totally based on some, for example, expert, let's say, expert selection of some, let's say, facts which are, for example, in which simply agree with the opinion of expert. So narrative reviews and expert opinions are also important somehow, but for example, to modulate somehow our political opinion about the situation or the clinical case. But I would rather say that this kind of studies like expert opinions and narrative, because they are important from another reason. They are important, for example, to just to start a discussion. Yeah? Start a discussion, for example, of for example, more experts, and for example, just to start some, let's say, yeah, just process of some, for example, provement, yeah, of the proof of concepts or something like this. So I would say that it's not like recommended. I don't want to recommend you just to simply adopt the some expert opinions. It could work, but it's better to make some meta-analysis. Yeah, still meta-analysis. We are still moving to this job of this pyramid. Editorial is still the same. It's full of subjective opinions of the author editorial. Okay, if we are going to one level up, this is a case control study, which is kind of retrospective study. And I'm going to talk about designs a bit more later. Yeah, but in few words, it is a kind of retrospective design. It means that at the time zero, so at this moment, like onset of the study, you have, for example, some subjects with some, let's say, developed consequences or developed, for example, disease, and you would like to search for risk factors. We are simply looking for risk factors in the past, yeah, in the history of this patients, in the cases of these patients. So it's better than only some opinions. It's better, but still, there is a large limitation of documentation of case histories of patients. Because if, for example, you simply ask your patient to some case history, believe me that many of the let's say individual facts he or she's going to told you, they are, for example, biased somehow, yeah. And for example, they are not like biased by their consciousness, but they are simply biased by the fact that, for example, the patients are not able to remember the facts properly. Yeah? There is not like a purpose to fake, for example, the case history, but they are simply not able to just to remember it correctly. So case control studies, they are retrospective. That's limitation. Cohort studies is better because they are perspective. So at the very beginning of the study, we have simply some, for example, two groups. One of the group is exposed to some factor, and the second group is simply controlled. This one is not exposed to the factor of our interest, and they are observed for some time, since they are just simple perspective, and we simply await if there will be the outcome of our interest, and it could be just develop in the exposed cohort and also in, for example, the control group. So cohort studies. So if you can see the colors, so the violet one, orange one, and yellow one, these studies are, or these, let's say, sources of information are limited. But this green one, they just start to be good. Yeah, they start to be acceptable. So core studies are good because they are prospective. They are just monitored in time, in a prospective time. So we are starting at a moment that we have two groups. One group patients called cohort. This one is exposed to some risky factor, for example, or some factor, or it could be also protective factor, for example, some drug, yeah, some drug exposure. And the second group is called control, and this one is not exposed to a risk or protective factor, and they are observed for outcome. And so they are from this moment till some future, if they are just going to develop the outcome. And so since this perspective, it's going to work. Yeah? It's better than the case, because case control studies have similar logic, but it goes to the history, case history, to the past. It is just the rest perspective. Randomized control trials, they are prospective. This is like the top design of study of today's evidence-based medicine, because, for example, if someone is willing to introduce a new pharmacological drug, simply the market of drugs, there's no other way than undergo the randomized control trial for this drug. It means that it's prospective and there are relatively tough test treatments. It means that there are two randomized groups. Both of the groups are, for example, of patients with some diagnosis, and for example, we would like to test a drug which could treat this kind of diagnosis. It's randomized. What does it mean, the word randomized? The word randomized means that these two groups are randomly, or the patients from one pool are randomly selected or split into two groups. And by this randomization, we are able to, for example, randomly distribute all the risky factors which are not measured, so which are, for example, which we cannot measure, or we cannot, for example, search for, or we almost, or even don't know about him. We don't know about them. It's also possible there are some risk factors we are not able to, we are simply not aware of them. So by this randomization, it doesn't matter if the patients are randomized, then we can suppose that, like, the average value of risk factors are in the first group, and similar average value of risk factors are in the second. So by this randomization, we can guarantee that the overall level of all risk factors, even the unknown one, so either no one or the unknown one, they are like randomly, so it means let's say equally distributed in both the groups. Then to one group is exposed to the test drug. The second one, which is called control group, is not exposed to the drug. And after some time, so half a year or something like this, or several months or something like this, we are going just to check if they're, for example, using the drug tend to some, let's say, for example, some better, some let's say better, let's say simply getting some, let's say, measured parameters of the disease, for example, to get better. Yeah, simple like this. If the work and some statistical analysis also works for the drug, it's like promising for the drug that it could be, for example, sometimes or after the control trial, for example, introduced to market. So it's just it's supposed to be just the top kind of study design of nowadays. And meta-analysis systematic review, it's kind of different kind of study, because it's a level up of randomized control trial, but meta-analysis is something which you can do, for example, in your simply in your office. It's not necessary to do some trials on some patients. Meta-analysis means that you have, for example, 100 of papers. All of these papers handle with the same topic, with the same hypothesis, with the same scientific question. And for example, let's say that 30 of this 100 papers, for example, get one kind of output, for example, let's say output A, capital A, and remaining 70 papers got an output capital B. And capital A and capital B are totally different outputs, and this could happen. This is something which is which simply happens on the daily basis in science. So how to make the final decision, how to make the final conclusion, and how to make the conclusion about, for example, what is for example closer to true, close to reality, output A or output B. Okay, you can say that if there are, for example, 70 papers for output B, it's maybe more likely that B is closer to reality. There are 30 papers for A, but I think it's not so much easy like this. There is like a very well established statistical analysis how to, for example, compare these papers and just to reconstruct all the entry data sets and make all the statistics in one. It just sort of puts all the data sets in one to reconstruct them, and it means that, for example, if like let's assume each one of the 100 page papers, for example, available to get, for example, a sample of, for example, 100 or rather, for example, 1,000 of 1,000 of 1,000 patients. If we have 100 of papers and we are able to reconstruct data sets from for each one of the papers, it means that we have 100 multiplied by 1,000. It's just 100 of 1,000 of patients. If we have too many patients to have statistics using 100 of 1,000 of patients, definitely your statistics going to be much more stronger and much more confident. So your final output based on your reconstructed data sets, these are just the final one, regardless of the fact how many of the papers stand for output B or output B, output B or output A. This is important. So meta-analysis is a kind of special statistical analysis which is able to put as in like use as input, for example, many papers handling with the same topic, with the same scientific question, and redo or reconstruct all the entry data and do the statistics in once, like from scratch in once, using this let's say aggregated, let's say superior data set, which is based on a combination of all the entry data sets of all the 100 entry papers, and you will do this kind of very huge statistics, and outputs of your statistics are the final outputs of the meta-analysis, and they could be supposed to be like the final answer to this scientific question, regardless of the, for example, individual results or individual outputs of the individual papers, any one of the 100 entry papers. And clinical practice guidelines is something which is at the top of this pyramid, because these guidelines are simply like they extract the important piece of knowledge from meta-analysis and some other kind of studies. And this is important because I think that, for example, here in the Czech Republic and in the Czech medicine, or maybe in some Eastern medicine, or also in some Western in Western Europe, the guidelines are not so much strictly applied. They usually exist. Yeah, for example, in the Czech medicine, there are many guidelines which you can find that I think that they are only in Czech, but I can show you the page. It just just want to give, yeah, okay, there's English. That's a piece of news, but okay, it doesn't look so much in English. Okay, I just switched to English, but it doesn't look so much in English. Okay, so, and just like, yeah, it's in Czech. It's just it's just a, let's say, you know, it's just a Czech Medical Society, Czech Medical Society of Jan Evangelista Purkyně. Definitely you have heard about this name. And Evangelista Purkyně was just a founder of the oldest department of physiology on the world, or around the world. You know, if you know Purkyně department, Purkyně Institute, it's just the absolutely oldest one, the oldest department of physiology all around the world. It's good to know about it. But I just hope it will be totally in English, but it's not totally. So sorry for this. So, and that's a problem, because the guidelines are, you can simply go here. Doporučené postupy in Czech means guidelines in English. If you go there are many, okay, they are just like, I just wanted to, okay, I think there are some ways how to, for example, find all of them, but regardless of this fact, unfortunately, they are in check. They are in check, and that's why, for example, they are sometimes it's, for example, there couldn't be so much accessible for you. And also, honestly, if I, for example, were just an oncologist at a department of oncology, I can tell you that okay, we know that there were some guidelines here, but we usually use only some good practice. I would say good practice is something which is somewhere in between your internal experience and guidelines. A good practice is maybe acceptable, but well, yeah. So what I wanted to say that there are usually some guidelines, yeah, but they are not so much strictly applied nowadays. Still not, I would say, still not. Okay, so it was about this pyramid. I'm going to talk about some of the parts in more details. So sorry. Yeah. Okay. So what is good to know about, for example, about the evidence-based? What, for example, common or some areas is good to know about something about them, just simply to apply the evidence-based medicine, let's say, concepts and ideas in your, let's say, uh, clinical practice, in our, yeah, just in your clinical practice. So it simply arises from the definition of evidence-based medicine. So some sources of information in biomedicine. The sources, yeah, they are usually based on some e-databases, like online or embedded online-based databases. And we are going to talk about some basic clinical databases. What is also important to know about is classification systems. It's also good to know something about, because maybe you have already heard about something which is called DRG, or systems like DRG and so on. This it is more than important for you from the first day after graduation. Once you are going to work, from the first day when you will work on a, like the bar department, definitely you are going to use classification systems. Also, fundamental scientific databases. It's good to know about some fundamental scientific databases. What is also important is just the how all the information, all the piece of information in biomedicine or medicine or in biomedicine, where they just they come from, and what is the, let's say, way, or what is the, let's say, you typical, yeah, typical original, or the typical way how they come from. Yeah, for example, typical, for example, ontogenesis of information in biomedicine. So it's good to know about the principle of studies design, and it's also good to know what are, for example, advantages and disadvantages of the designs, and what is it. It is sometimes called the value of scientific proof in medicine, yeah, but in other words, simply means what are the advantages and disadvantages of study design. So it's good to know, for example, that a clinical trial like this one is much more better, or much more, it could be considered to be much more valid than, for example, case control, or even, for example, narrative reviews or experiment opinions. These are like, as I told you, they are good to start discussion here, but not to make any conclusion. Well, and what is also good to know, and I think that we are going to talk about many of these ideas next Monday, because I'm just going to talk about mainly this month. Today, I'm just going to talk about maybe the clinical databases, clinical systems, and maybe some of the designs. But definitely, we are going to go about some, yeah, just volume from the group of medicine, and for sure, I'm going to talk about the rules and good practice, how to apply this based on medicine to your practice. I'm going to talk about this on next Monday, because I'm going to go more into some decision making, as I already told you, which should be based on your experience, on some probability rules and statistic rules. And as I told you, don't be scared by these words, because we have already have a lecture on statistics. I think it was definitely a good one. And yeah, so probability and statistics is something which is definitely sometimes, or which needed to be sometimes to apply to medicine, because thinking of a doctor, I think of a medical doctor, a physician, daily routine, it's a probabilistic one. Because if you have a patient with some set of symptoms, yeah, some bunch of symptoms, a patient just came to you with some bunch of symptoms, and for example, if it is not too much clear what the diagnosis could be, you have to start thinking about all possible diagnoses, all possible options, what the diagnosis could be. And in such a case, it's normal to think about it in some decreasing sequence. So at the first time, or at the first place, you should think about the most likely diagnosis. Then, if you are going to reject it or accept it, or if you are going to reject it, then you still don't know the correct diagnosis. You have to think about it one more time. And the second most likely diagnosis could be the D1. So one more, you have to reject it or accept it or just confirm it by some, for example, examination or some laboratory examination or whatever. And this is called Saturn law. Yeah, this is like based on something which is called permutation inequality. There are many many mathematics behind medicine, and this is what I'm going to talk about next Monday, next Monday. So yeah, so as I told you, it's a very complex area, very complex field of a very interesting field of medicine, and yeah, that's why we are going to dedicate two lectures. And still, I'm just going on to like the skim over the surface. Yeah, I'm not going to go into some more detail because it will be very exhausting for all of us. So let's start with the clinical databases because it's good to know where to find like your information sources, where to find the information itself, just to for example, just to have some insights into up-to-date medicine. It's important. You know that there is just a Google. Yeah? You can Google for almost everything. But regarding the medicine, it's better to know about some, let's say, very well approved, and like it's just approved kind of sources, because you know that Google is great, like a way how to search for almost everything, but still, medicine is like something like a very sensitive kind of science. So sometimes better to use some like more approved kind of sources, you know. So it's good to distinguish between primary and secondary information sources. So primary information sources are D1, which usually include all the original information, or in like the original, you know, like in a for original way. It means that, for example, if there is, for example, it means that, for example, if you search for some, let's say, a paper or a scientific journal, you are usually interested in the, let's say, full text there. So the full text, so from the first word until the last word of this journal, also of this paper, you would like to get the full text of the paper. So this is like the original information. So it's not like, for example, some kind of redirect or some redigest or this kind of, for example, or for example, extraction like an abstract or something like this. You are interested, sometimes you are interested in the full original information. So primary information sources are the ones which include the full original information, which with no changes, with no post process changes. And usually they are, or okay, they could be digital based, so e-based, like they are usually online, or they could be also printed out. For example, some textbooks or books in general, or they are usually printed out. Still, we still live in a time that books and textbooks are still printed out. I think it's a good thing, because, you know, for example, you should you know, if you are just simply watching your laptop monitor, for example, for 8 hours daily, it's better to switch to some printed out textbook, for example, for an hour or something like this. Still better. So some of them are simply printed out, some of them are digital based. So journal articles, I would say it's a 50-50. Some of the journal articles are still printed out. For example, you can like subscribe for some like a subscriber, and for example, you can get printed issues of the journal, of this journal. So simply the journal issues you can get, for example, to your post box. Why not? But I would say maybe, okay, I just said 50-50, but maybe, okay, more than 50% are nowadays like digitally based. Yeah. So it means that there are no like printed issues. They are only online. They are only digitally based. So you can search for them on internet. And that's also what I'm going to talk about, how to host it for a good sources on internet. So primary information source, we are usually interested in primary information source, but how to get the information, where to find the primary information source. That's why there are also secondary information sources, because the secondary information sources are they don't include the original information in a full size, without any changes. They are rather about to link to the sources, link the original sources, which originally include the information, include the original information. So they are rather something like links, yeah, or like for example ways that they can, for example, give a clue where to find the original information, where to find the original paper, or where to find the original textbook, where to find the original paragraph, for example, which claims something or something like this. They are usually digital based. Secondary information sources are usually digital, and these are usually some databases, clinical databases, where you can try to find for some original primary sources, information sources, and then you can just try to Google for the original one, and try to, for example, to some of them, let's say, book them at some library or something like this. So the secondary information sources are usually able to answer to the question where to find the information about the original, where to find the original information, or what exactly we can find about the original information. So where to find the original, or what exactly is the original information source about, something like this. So where to find it. So as I told, it's rather something like a link, or for example, a way where to find the original source, where to find the primary information source. So these are like both the bibliographic or clinical databases. I would say still they are called bibliographic, but which implies that they are printed out. But nowadays, all the clinical databases like PubMed or Scholar or whatever, they are rather online. Yeah, they are online. I think that they are not. Maybe sometimes there are some anthologies which are printed out. There are something like a let's say extracted piece of information from these databases, but like the database itself, they are, I would say, 100% online. They are only online. There could be some library catalogs. Also, they are nowadays they are usually online for indexes. Yeah, and so the most important term is like clinical databases. What are the important clinical databases? So I'm going to talk about them, but this stuff could be a little boring. So I'm just going to skim over the surface, and I'm going to, for example, point out only the important one here, because some of them are important for all of us. For example, I would say Medvic is important, WordCat is important, Bibliotheca Czechoslovakia is maybe somehow important since you study medicine in the Czech Republic. Kastlin and Ilona, I would say these are not so much important, but I just listed these two sources here. You can also see that this one is in Czech, and there's no like I think there's no like English transcript. Of course I can translate it, but it's not like used in general. And what is like digitally based primary sources, which is PubMed, is absolutely top. Yeah, you should know about PubMed. Embase is also important, maybe somehow current contents, and Scientometrics, and also there are some more of them. For example, some database of Elsevier or Sage, or let's say Google Scholar is also applicable for this. So, but they are Google Scholar is absolutely. There's no like any clue how to get the for example some authorization to get just start using Google Scholar. So these are like a list of clinical databases, and these one were primarily bibliography based, but nowadays I think that all of them are transformed into online version. Yeah. So let's start with some of them. And as I told you, as I swear to, I just going to pick out only the important piece of knowledge, not to make it so much, not just to make too much, yeah, because it will be like a list of many databases, and it's not so much important. So Medvic is important generally in a context of the Czech medicine, because Medvic is something I'm going just to talk about mesh, which is a medical subject heading, which is a thesaurus. It's just something like an intelligent or smart vocabulary, smart medical vocabulary based by Medline, which is totally the most important Medline. I mean this. This Medline is totally the most important database you should know about, and it uses something which is I'm sorry, okay. It uses mesh, which is some kind of thesaurus, just an intelligent vocabulary, smart vocabulary, how to make for example, automatic tagging of all documents. So, and by this tagging, you can, for example, find out your, for example, desired sources about, for example, your scientific question about your patient or whatever. And this thesaurus, so for example, think about it like, for example, have like a system of synonyms or antonyms or some relations between the different terms and different words in medicine. If, for example, there is just a term cancer for neoplasia. So we have a cancer, we have a neoplasia. Sometimes it's also called tumor. Yeah, so these three words are synonyms. And the thesaurus is about to pick up which one of them is the most commonly used. I think that maybe it's hard to say. In case of cancer versus tumor versus neoplasia, all of them are commonly used. But thesaurus is about to pick up which one of them is just most often used. And this one is like something which is like a key, let's say keyword, like an automatic keyword, and the mesh is full of keywords for different terms in medicine. And by these different terms, it could be, for example, all the documents, all the journal papers could be tagged automatically by for example, set of tags or this special words, defined words, which are extracted from some relations like synonyms, antonyms, and so on. So mesh is this kind of special language, let's say, special language. It's like a, let's say, vocabulary. And the Czech translation of mesh is the one which I told you, which is used by Medvic. So Medvic is like the Czech information system, which is maintained by the National Medical Library, and it is famous and it's important for us because it made the translation of mesh and uses a Czech translation of mesh to, for example, to do the tagging for the Czech written documents. Of course, Czech written documents are not of so much high impact towards, for example, worldwide medicine. Of course not, but still they are, for example, important if we, for example, do some dissertation or the thesis, for example, in Czech. I think many of my colleagues still did thesis in Czech and in Czech language. So from this reason, it's still important to have something like a Czech translation of the mesh of medical subject, which is, as I told you, just special vocabulary, special dictionary of synonyms, such that the synonyms are such that from each set of synonyms, only one is picked up, and this one is used to for the tagging, for the automatical tagging of the documents. So that's why the Medvic is important. So if you're using a Medvic, it bridges a connection to Bibliotheca America Czechoslovakia. It's like the secondary information source for the Czech and the Slovak for documents written in Czech and Slovak. So I would say it's rather interesting than important, maybe. So if we go to the Medvic page, I'm just going to go there. Okay, what can I use it for? At this moment, there is maybe not so much like, okay, you can switch it to English. It's a good piece of news. Switch it to English. And if you are interested, why this is important for you? There is one application why this is important for you, or it could be important for you. Okay, nowadays, okay, now there is just a COVID pandemic, but let's believe that one day all the things just will come back to normal, and there will be again possible just to for example, get some books, for example, in some libraries, just to lend the books, for example, for some limited time, for example, your home and study at your home. And Medvic is a kind of system that if you are for example, listen to for example, just to get some book, for example, some limited time to your home and study at your home, you can, for example, search for it using a browser or some basic search. It's like this. And why this is important? Okay, there are many libraries in Prague, of course, but why the Medvic is important? Like the system of library system. The Medvic is important for the fact that the Medvic is connected to the National Medical Library. The National Medical Library is library which is pretty close to our faculty. So maybe, I don't know if you, maybe I believe that someone who already visited this National Medical Library. It's yeah, National Medical Library. It's pretty close. If you know IP Pavlova station, you know, like the small square IP Pavlova, you know, let's say, you know, there are some McDonald's there and so, and Paul, you know, baguettes and so on. You know, IP Pavlova station. And if you go towards our faculty, towards the dean's office and neurology and anatomy department, so you are from IP Pavlova to dean's office this way. So once you are crossing the one of the large street which is full of traffic, there's a traffic jam all the time. There's just there's a light crossroad, and if you are crossing it, and if you just like turn to your left, there are two large buildings, so it's pretty close to our faculty. It's maybe 200 meters from our office deans, and one of these buildings is National Medical Library. And it's important for you because why it is important for you to know about it, or why is it good to know about it? Because in National Medical Library is just like a kind of special library which offers their services only to students of medicine or medical doctors. And that's a good piece of news, because if you are, for example, searching for some book or journal paper or whatever, there is no like a competition with some other users, with some other from street, because they are willing to provide any services and so only to medical students. So we have to show them your IC card, or to medical professionals like physicians or whatever, or for example, faculty teachers, medical professionals, and so on. So this is like a very limited population. It means that there is almost no competition. So it means in the end that you are very likely to get your printed out document at this library. So think about this in this way. Use the Medvic, for example, as an interface to search for if you are, for example, if you'll be in a situation that you are interested in some book, textbook, or article, use this Medvic interface, because you are very likely to get the printed out copy if you are interested in, since the fact that a Medvic is a system of National Medical Library, and National Medical Library is like a, in other words, it means that like no like people outside of the population of medical doctors or medical students, they are not allowed to come into just able to enter the National Medical Library. This is a kind of reception, and you have to legitimate by your IC cards as well. So it's in fact, it's in the end a good fact, good piece of news, because there's no competition, so much competition in services. It means that yeah, very likely we will get your document you are interested in. So think about this. This is the practical information I wanted to say. As I told you, I'm just going to skip the boring stuff, and I would like to tell you the interesting stuff. So Medvic, consider Medvic as an interface of a library, National Medical Library. Since you know that the National Medical Library is open for you, but only for you as students of Czech medicine. Yeah, good to know it. Good to know it. Okay, this is about Medvic. Kesslin, as I told you, Kesslin and jednotná informační brána. It's funny, jednotná informační brána. If I try to translate to English, I'm just wondering if they have. Oh, I hope that they could have. Okay. You know what? Because they switched their name to knihovny.cz, which means libraries.cz. Libraries.cz. They switched their name to. I just mentioned it here. Yeah, they are now actually called libraries. But okay, I'll tell you. If you know about the Medvic, it's not so much important for the about Caslin or even my information about the knihovny, about libraries, because Medvic is the largest one, yeah. So use the Medvic term, because as I showed you the show you the interface, just find our title, journal, subject, or whatever. You can search for it, yeah, in the Medvic system. I would say that all of these are just connected, yeah. But Medvic is maybe the most important, as I told you, the fact with the National Library. Think about it, yeah. Keep this in mind. Could be important for you. So Medvic is important. Castlin, something which is, yeah, is also managed by National Library, also provides some many sources of primary sources get by Czech libraries. So, but if you know about Medvic, I think it's better to use the Medvic. This is something very interesting. I would say that from some historic reasons, there are more than only one, let's say, database or one uh, like information system or information or clinical database in the Czech language, but it could be switched to English. But so it's from some historical reasons. But yeah, Medvic is the most important one. But these could also work. Why not? But Medvic is most important for. Similar for the jednotná informační brána. As I told you, it's now called knihovny, like libraries.cz. It's also the one user interface. So okay, we can take a look at the Caslin. Okay, give it a second. And it could be. I hope it's could be switched to. Okay, it's somehow in Czech, somehow in English. Yeah, it could be switched to English. Okay, so if we prefer this, why not? Yeah, why not? So it's also, we can also search for some book or magazine. So I would say that the engine which is behind this, like the this Caslin and the Medvic, they could be very similar, maybe even the same. Yeah, as I do. There are several interfaces from some, simply from some historical reasons. Jednotná informační brána, like libraries nowadays, libraries also very similar. It's like, let's switch it to English like this, and also enterprise acquire like a boot title or whatever. And it's going to give you where the books, for example, or journals or some journal papers, where they are physically stored, and the Czech libraries. Yeah, something like that. I'm just going to, for example, anatomy 3, for example. I don't know, it's going to Čihák number 3, you know. It's going to, yeah, okay, definitely are pretty familiar with this kind of books. And yeah, it's going to show me, for example, there is a National Medical Library. So yeah, if I, as I told you, IP Pavlova, yeah, and so on. So it works like this. It's official, but I think we are just in a digital era. It's not necessary to show and to teach you how to use G4 books. Biblioteca Czechoslovakia, it's something similar to PubMed, but in Czech context. It's all academic literature published in Czechoslovakia in biomedicine. And yeah, it's also work with Czech and Slovak artists link and publishing abroad. Yeah, so it's focused both on Czech and Slovak written papers in abroad, and all papers which are written in the area just in the district of Czechia or Slovakia. As I told you, honestly, all of us know that, for example, almost simple, all of us know that, of course, the impact of Czech medicine to the worldwide medicine. I think that there is some impact. You know that some of the fields of Czech medicine are like on a, well, let's say like on the worldwide level. Yeah? For example, Czech neonatology or Czech cardiology, or maybe Czech child orthopedics. Also some maybe obstetrics, maybe some of the fields are very well known all around the world, in the province of Czech Republic, definitely. But on the other hand, some of them are not so much. So they are not so much famous. For example, I would say that Czech oncology is not so much good nowadays. It was better in the past, but nowadays it's one of the, let's say, it's I would say it's not very well funded. Yeah, all is about the money. So it's not well funded. So we have not so much good diagnostics tools and so on. So it's relatively underfunded. So that's that's why. Okay. So from some reason, we were interested in this kind of source. It could be, for example, if you, I'm sorry, it works to medic, it turns to medic. Okay, if from some reason or another you will be interested in some checkly written works in biomedicine, then this is like something like a PubMed. PubMed for world is the same like Bibliography America Czechoslovakia for Czech Republic. But I think that all the Czech doctors who are, for example, kind of associated to some academia, they use PubMed, of course, not this Bibliography America Czechoslovakia. So that was what WordCat is simple. WordCat is good for you. It's just a kind of common sense. WordCat is just simply. I'm sorry, this just I put it should be WordCat. Yeah, it's just a WordCat. It should be WordCat. Yeah. It's good to know about it. It's still the same. Like for example, you know about what is Amazon about. What is, for example, I don't know, Google about. If you know this general services, then it's also good to know about what the WordCat is about. Yeah, what WordCat can provide for. WordCat can enable simply searching for primary documents all around the world, and this is like the relatively interesting service. Since it's all around the world, I'm going just simply to go to the link. Yeah, it's just maintained by Onegobir Library Center, and it's just the most complete primary source catalog all around the world. So if I mention the Medvic is good for the fact is that you can get the, if you are just Prague-based now, and once the libraries are going to be open, let's hope it will be very, very soon, and if you are interested in some book, either in Czech or English, it doesn't matter. You can get it in National Med Library at IP Pavlova Station. Yeah, very close to Dean's office, very close to the first faculty, medicine. That's okay, good fit for us. But WorldCat is just like the absolutely most complete primary source all around the world, and it's that's like why it's so strong. That's powerful. It's more than 100 millions about sources, articles, video, audio records, and so on and so on and so on. And a good property of this service is that once you are going to enter your query about your primary source you would like to get, like a physical copy of this entry, you can find out where is the nearest physical copy of this source available. So if I'm just going to WordCat to give it like an example. Okay, I'm just going to switch to English if it's possible. I believe it is possible. Okay, English. And I'm just going to zoom it a bit. Okay, so for example, I'm just interested some, okay, still the same story, anatomy, for example. I feel like it would be just jihad, you know. Yeah. Maybe this one. So I'm just going to proceed. And what I would expect is that, yeah, okay, it gives me like it was this is my entry location. So I've just done Prague 7, yeah, like Holešovice, Prague, you know, Prague, the Holešovice district, and the National Library is pretty close to me, or relatively close. It's just on the opposite bank of the Vltava River. So what is going to give you, the WordCat is going to give you where to find the nearest, the closest, the nearest place where you can give the like the copy, physical copy of the textbook or book or a journal paper or whatever you are interested in, and that's a really good property. Yeah, so just because it's under one roof, yeah, all of this is under one roof. Of course, you can try to Google it, yeah, but this is all of it is under one roof. And what is also maybe interesting that this is not like this web page is not fulfilled by some advertorials or some ads and so on. So it's not really convenient. Okay, WordCat, good to know about it. Yeah. I'm just going back to my presentation. Okay. So this was about the important, let's say, some of the important databases, and I'm just going to talk about how is the primary source described by the secondary source, by the secondary sources. So there are several ways how to describe the primary source by the secondary source. So the one of the way, and I think that this is one of the most important way, is to using the abstract. So secondary sources include either abstract or descriptors or keywords, or they could include all of them. And this is the way how they are able to describe what is the primary source about. What is the primary source they link to? What is the primary source about? So if they use abstract, what is the abstract? Abstract is usually something like a yeah, they usually the secondary source usually adopt an abstract from the primary source. It may be the good strategy, because abstracts is when you try to write a scientific journal or just a paper, simple paper. Abstract is maybe one of the most important part of the paper, because the abstract is something if definitely the reviewer is going to find some, let's say, uncertainties or some imperfections in your abstract, is very likely going to reject your paper. And it's good. It's just a good. It's like a yeah, bad luck for you, of course. So abstract is should be well prepared. Should be really worked out part of the primary source or journal paper. So when the secondary sources adopt the abstract, it's good to do it this way, because abstract is, for example, it's something like it's going to. Also, let's say it does several paragraphs which should be no longer than maybe 200 of words or 300 words, maybe. So it's not really short. It's maybe like maybe 3 paragraphs. No, it shouldn't longer than 300 words. And sometimes the abstract is so it's more something like a tell the story of my paper. Tell the story. Absolutely something like we should tell the story of your paper. So in other words, we just if you try to squeeze up your paper in several sentences and absolutely pick up or figure out the most important parts, most important things, most important points about your paper, then they should be included in abstract. So abstract is something which is very fruitful, which is very condensed. Yeah, which very yeah, these are condensed and fruitful. Let's say this way, a fruitful condensed kind of text, which should relatively goodly very well describe your paper using only several sentences. So that's why it could be that's why it can in a relatively fine way to describe the primary source. So this is the abstract. The descriptor, or let's say a bunch of descriptors. So if the secondary source using a bunch of descriptors to describe your primary sources, it means that one descriptor is a keyword which is standardized usage, which standardized such that it belongs to a defined and as well-established vocabulary of keywords, and this is called thesaurus. And as I already do, one of the thesaurus which I said to before is just a mesh, medical subject headings. So keywords. So descriptor is one of the keywords. This is just simply a keyword which is automatically, for example, automatically picked up and standardized in some way. So as I told you, example of neoplasia or cancer or tumor. Let's say that, for example, a keyword or descriptor from these 3 could be, for example, neoplasia. Neoplasia could be just a descriptor, and the other one, tumor or cancer. There could be some, for example, confusions, because tumor is something which is relatively large to give some, for example, mechanical impact on the tissue. So this could be something which is a bit different, or some special meaning in comparison to neoplasia. And also the cancer, that the cancer is sometimes related only to neoplasia of epithelial kind of tissues. But you have some, for example, soft kind of tissue or some muscles or some parenchymatous organs, and so neoplasias of these organs, they are not usually called cancers, they are called like sarcomas, you know. So cancer and tumor is in fact something different. That's why it has to be, for example, the test has to be done, let's say, in very clever way. How to, for example, describe all the possible synonyms. So description is done standardized way, and usually nowadays it's done automatically. And a keyword is something similar to descriptor, but keyword is just a word which describes the content of the primary source, but it was just introduced by an author. So it was just done, let's say, manually, or it was just simply, yeah, it was inserted by author. And you know, there are many authors. There are many authors. There could be many keywords, and the keywords could be, for example, there will be various and different keywords for example, the same topic, or for example, same scientific question. That's why the keyword is maybe it's not so much, well, let's say, ideal way how to describe the primary source, but still it's usually used because, for example, me as an author of some several journal papers, all the time, always I was asked to import, for example, 3 to 5 keywords, yeah, like thinking about by myself. So manually, things just thought out manually by me. So yeah, if for example the same paper was just submitted by my colleague, and he'll just ask to think out to thought out just the yeah, for example 3 to 5 keywords. He's definitely going to think out 5 or 3 or 4 different keywords than me, and that's why this is relatively subjective. While the abstract is also subjective, it could be as but at least it's just relatively fruitful. It's for example 200 of words, and it's relatively, it should be relatively enough to get some idea of what is the primary source about. The descriptor is a bunch of, or just a set of some tags, let's say, or yeah, keywords or tags, which could, for example, define with the definition, the combination of descriptors could relatively good define what is the primary source about as well. It works as well. Okay, then you go to the mesh. I already talked about it. Just the medical subject headings. Yeah, it's usually those in classification system biomedicine. It's used primarily by PubMed. It's translated to some local languages like the Czech by Medvic and so on. I will told this to international, yeah, so it's just mesh thesaurus, important one. International decimal scaling, I think it's not so much important for you to know about this. So maybe you forgot on this. Mesh is important. Yeah, it's good to know about mesh because yeah, it's just a abbreviation for medical subject headings. Yeah, medical subject headings, and as I told you, it's a language or vocabulary dictionary of descriptors. So automatically made and standardized to mesh. Because yeah, if you know, for example, if we are willing to make a journal of some, for example, cancer of stomach, then definitely those will be just neoplasia, stomach, and maybe some treatment of stomach, cancer or something. So this will be the descriptors. Yeah. Okay, so this is just a mesh. So we will just limited number, limited set of descriptors which could be used to tag the final document as for example as closely as possible. International decimal scaling, forget on this. I think it's not so much used today. PubMed, yeah, okay. So we are moving towards the online-based databases, and absolutely the most important one you should know about is just PubMed online. So I'm just going to the pages to give you some insight on this. Okay, COVID-19 is emerging of the whole situation, of course. And yeah, first search if you're interested in some, let's say for example, some I don't know, I don't know if it will be like author, author, I don't know if you like, for example, I'm just going to find for myself. Maybe it will work, nothing. Yeah, I don't know if it will work for this. I don't know if it will work or not. I believe it's going to, okay, it's going to search for something. Okay. Oh, that's the way. Okay, if you can, for example, search by authors, but definitely what is maybe most convenient way for you how to search for some topic on mesh is to use the mesh term. Yeah, mesh term. So, for example, if you are, it would be just interesting. Some, for example, like as I told you, for example, cancer of stomach. Yeah, otherwise. Okay, it was just adopted by this text area, and it got this kind of this kind of mark, like it's just considered to be mesh terms. And let's search using this mesh terms. I don't know if it's just a valid mesh terms, but we can try it. I think it's going to be automatically rewritten to some mesh thesaurus descriptors, yeah, and it should work very well. I think so. It should work well. It should work well. It works very well. It seems to work very well because you got some overviews. You get some, let's say, you can also limit it, for example, some up-to-date. Yeah, I'm sorry, just some up-to-date works. Like for example, last 3 years, let's say. Yeah. To get only, for example, to get free full text is also very interesting option because you can get all the all the full text of the primary source, and so on and so on. You can type, for example, a review, which will be some more informative and it's going into some more detail, but it will rather in some, for example, more context, or meta-analysis, for example, and so on and so on. Yeah, it's going. You can see that the number of results is going to be reduced by all other conditional constraint, but why not? Yeah. So by the way, you can get, let's say it's guaranteed that for example, the articles should be free. So let's try to, for example, go for gastroenteric neuroendocrine tumor. So I'm just going to click this out, and how to get the full text. Usually, it's like by full text links. If we are going to relay, for example, database, I'm just going to click them, and there should be like a full text. Yeah, and that's it. It's here. Perfect. So I just maybe go to PDF. It sounds very promising. That's great. Okay, it seems that I got 17 pages paper about the neuroendocrine tumors, gastroneuroendocrine tumors, and that's great. Yeah, absolutely, in absolutely way. Well, so that's way how to use the PubMed. You should know about this. If you forget all other things about this from this lecture, please take in mind that there is something like a PubMed or Medline. These are just synonyms, and use them for example, searching for some information. Yeah. Sorry, this is important. So because it's like the National Library of Medicine is just a Bethesda, maybe you know. So PubMed, definitely important to know about it. And the way how to search work. You can use this full text, of course, but using the mesh terms means that it's this kind of extra functionality using the smart tagging. Yeah, the smart tagging. It's maybe going more effective way, yeah, to find the just the final outcome, final results for your query. So it was a PubMed. It's made by National Library of Medicine. You know, it's just Bethesda. I think it's just a southwestern part of New York. I think state of New York. It keeps millions and millions of citations, thousands of journals, and more than 70 counties, and so on. So it's superior things about this, and yeah, maybe what should, yeah, it's using mesh. Good to know about it because you can use it for the searching itself. It's also some responsible approach to get all the papers back to 1966. Could be interesting, but you know, medicine is early fast living organism itself, and it means that I think it maybe it's really disputable. It's like feasible to search, for example, for papers older than 10 years. Yeah, I would say that all the paper older than 10 years It could be. It could be some in some, for example, areas like immunology and so on. I think that whatever is older than 5 years, it's really old, and it could be totally. Yeah, the reality could be totally different. And for example, in papers older than 5 years, it depends. It depends. Of course, for example, some traditional fields are, for example, they are just they don't change so rapidly, but still. Okay, so it's a PubMed. M-based and current contents. Okay, M-based, maybe M-based is Elsevier, yeah. I never saw this. I didn't really know about it. You already heard about Elsevier. M-based is Elsevier. It's kind of commercial service, yeah. I think that if you are, what is also a practical piece of information for you, if you'll be on a campus of first faculty of medicine, you can try to log in using the shibboleth. But I'm just in my home, so I think that I'm not able to get it there. And it's also very likely that this kind of login interface page is going to be skipped automatically once you are going to log into M-based from campus, from faculty campus. I think this could be like done automatically, because as far as I know, some of the pages do this automatically, and very likely this is also one of them. So M-based Thomson Reuters is something very similar to M-based. This is not like the Elsevier, this is like Thomson Reuters. Thomson Reuters is very well known among the scientists because of one fact. It's very well known for something which is called impact factor, and Thomson Reuters is like the guarantor of the fact that impact factors are calculated correctly for all the worldwide journals in biomedicine. So Thomson Reuters is well known for this. Maybe I was also good about this in Scientometrics, but still, yeah, it's more for it. But it works on pretty similar principles like the M-base. Okay, still, since I'm just outside of my faculty campus, I think it doesn't work like an automatic login. But I think it's better to go there using login at the faculty campus. Yeah. But if you know how to use Medvic, I think that you are not going to use M-base or Thomson Reuters, because Medvic should include all of the stuff, which also includes Thomson Reuters or M-base and some other stuff. So using Medvic, sorry, I just said Medvic. I just mean of course PubMed or Medline. Sorry, I just mean PubMed. So using Medline or PubMed is of course a bit better, since the fact, or by knowing the fact that what is included by Thomson Reuters or M-base is for sure included in PubMed or Medline, but there's also some other extra stuff on PubMed, so don't hesitate to use PubMed. And scenario, I think this is maybe kind of interesting because there's also something like a clinical database which is dedicated to nursing and some allied health literature. Yeah? So it's like for some other kind of medical professionals, not like medical or dentist doctors. It's rather for some other staff of these professionals. So sometimes they talked rather about, for example, medical-based nursing or medical-based physiotherapy or something like this, rather than, for example, medical-based evidence-based medicine. But of course, evidence-based medicine is something which is maybe a kind of superior term, and it also includes evidence-based physiotherapy or evidence-based nursing and so on. So sometimes this could be handy, but I think that nowadays it uses some pricing models and it's not free of charge. It used to be free of charge, but maybe if you are interested, you can try it at faculty campus somehow. One is it be possible, but For example, some of them looks to be free. For example, yeah, edition, or for example, I don't know, try to search for honestly, I didn't. Okay, it's based on some pricing models. Honestly, I don't use this so much, so I don't know about this too much. I think it is will be spread the same for you. And one more time, PubMed is important for us. So EBSCO and this kind of nursing database, they are so much important, but it could be handy. It could be handy to know about them. That there is something like this. Okay, classification system. I'm just going to talk about it very quickly. Classification according. Okay, classification system. What are the classification systems about? Classification systems are simply the ways how to, for example, code pieces of information in medicine or biomedicine, and to make some relations between different terms in medicine. It's usually used to, for example, make some, let's say, lists of, for example, terms which are, for example, connected by the same logic. For example, which is list of diseases or list of symptoms or list of, for example, etiologies or whatever, or for example, list of surgeries or catalogs of drugs or whatever. So these are like typically classification systems. So classification systems are used to classify or encode items of the same, for example, logic, or items of which are related by some, for example, shared property, like all of them, for example, like surgeries or drugs or procedures or symptoms or diagnosis or syndromes or whatever. So there are several ways how to do the classification. We done using several different number of dimensions. If there's only one dimension, then we use we say that it's just a linear kind of linear catalog list without any hierarchy. For example, the catalogs of surgeries. It's simply the catalogs from A to Z, from A to Z. So list of surgeries from A to Z. In simple words, in layman terms, it's just simply a catalog from A to Z. A catalog of procedures also is just a catalog from A to Z, like from the first item, last item, and these catalogs, the linear catalogs, the linear classifications are usually maintained by, for example, health insurances. For example, health insurance have some catalogs of surgeries which are just going to pay for them for effectors in medicine, for doctors or for surgeons or whatever. So they usually defined this linear classification systems as let's say some services which they are willing to pay for the doctors or for like this. So these are like maintained by health insurances. So they are typically, for example, if you know the main health insurance company in Czech Republic, it's just a VZP, in Czech Všeobecná zdravotní pojišťovna, which means something like a general health insurance company. Yeah, something like this in translation to English. Like it's code typically 111. 111 code is simple, like typical for this health insurance company. And yeah, so they maintain this kind of the kind of classification systems. It's important because it's important from the fact that if you are just a doctor, a physician, and you have, for example, to make, for example, some kind of, let's say, report, or just a hospital report, or simple documentation of hospital, just from for a patient who was just for example, hospital, and to conclude what procedures or which are just done to the patient. It has to be you have to use the items and codes from this list of insurance companies, because this is like usually connected to the hospital or ambulance information systems, and you usually use the codes which are shared with this health insurance companies. So this is also somehow related to the fact that I said DRG system. DRG system is something that if we have a patient and for example, the patient just going to leave the hospital, we are going to make some kind of some kind of documentation which should conclude up all the situation, all the possible, all the relevant facts about his or her time in hospital, and we have to use DRG system. DRG system is like you should, for example, make a list of 5 or 10 diagnoses or symptoms, such that the patient, which is he or she suffers from, or they could also be developed during the during their during time in the hospital. So it's necessary for you to give out to think out 10 or 5, let's say, diagnosis or symptoms, because by this cause of these symptoms or diagnosis, the VAR department you work at, is going to be paid by the health insurance company. So DRG, I would say the DRG codes, DRG system of codes of diagnosis and symptoms, and also some procedural surgeries, is, for example, something like a shared or common language between, for example, hospitals and doctors in hospitals and health insurance companies. Yeah, because they know that if there is just patient with a bunch of DRG codes of some diagnosis or surgeries or procedures, it means that it's absolutely it just simply determined how many of, let's say, some credits or some, let's say, it could be simply recalculated in what's like, for example, using some currency. So how much money, for example, is the health insurance company going to pay for the for all the procedures which were done for the patient during its stay in hospital. Yeah, so yeah, so that's done by DRG codes. DRG, you definitely are going to talk about it, or maybe or about the DRG codes. For example, yeah, it's using also some kind of codes which are called ICD-10. Definitely, I believe that many of you already heard about ICD-10. ICD is just International Classification of Disease, with yeah, just international classification disease and some other symptoms and so on. And it uses several dimensions. It is just a kind of other classification system which uses several dimensions. It's not a linear one. It's used classification using more variables to classify its items. It could be, for example, simplified only to one dimension. So to make the, for example, I don't know, to make it in alphabetical increasing order. Of course, it could be done in this way, but we usually use several more variables. One of the variables, for example, is location in some of the organ systems. For example, you know that, for example, all the diseases all the codes which start with a letter I, simply I, they are related to cardiovascular system. Or, for example, to all diseases which start with a letter C, they are related to cancers or whatever organ system. Yeah. So there's a logic like some variable which is depicted, which describes the localization of a pathology or the diagnosis within a human body, with a patient's body. And there are some other codes, like, for example, there are some numbers which follow the initial letter, and the numbers stand, for example, for some details about what the diagnosis, what the diagnosis was about. Just to make some details, for example, what is the kind of diagnosis, for example, let's say expectation about this diagnosis, or if it's just a chronic or acute one, or, for example, it's just a kind of this kind of problem. So this is by ICD-10. I'm just going to joke. Yeah, there are some. Okay, there are some examples. So ICD-10, international classification disease -10. It means that it was just nowadays still applied to 10th version, but it's applied from 1993. And maybe if I may be honest, I would say that in the version, in the ninth version, which was before the 1993, there were some totally strange things in the ICD. And honestly, I don't know if it's just able, it's okay to talk about it, but there are some, for example, let's say deviations from some normal states, let's say, and I would say that absolutely nowadays, nowadays, like society nowadays, communities all around the world are absolutely okay with this kind of deviations. Like, for example, that uh, yeah, some of the, let's say, for example, sexual orientations are they're absolutely all right. We know that, for example, they are not like supposed to be diseases. But honestly, this is a really strange thing. But I know that in the version which was before the 1993, some of this kind some kinds of this sexual, for example, deviations or sexual simply the deviations from sexual orientation, which are nowadays totally considered as a variance of normal, and all of these people have exactly the same rights, like the English British idiom, yeah. Just straight or gay doesn't matter, and this is exactly the thing. This was in the version before the 1993. This was supposed like a something like it has its own code. It was supposed somewhere in between the disease and normal. It was so strange. It was the ninth version of the ICD was like some of these changes in orientation were supposed to be diseases, and it's absolutely bullshit. But it was really something which was, I don't know. Okay, nowadays, fortunately, in this revised version from 1993, all these strange things disappear from nowadays version, but still, it's something which is maybe not so. It's something which is, yeah, which are to be forgotten, but still. And I think we are still waiting to the 11th version, which should be, it will just plan, I think, to, and it's something like 2017, but I don't know why it's not. When it was just yeah, it's still prepared. Yeah, it's still prepared. The next one is still prepared, and it takes unexpectedly long time, the preparation of the new version. So it goes maybe more than 10,000 diseases, and you can see the logic of the codes. You can see that, for example, just the number. This is the number 2010. This is the newest version, but we still await the next version. Yeah. So there are some small changes. Small changes which are, for example, still the 10th version is like the basis for these small changes. So this is like small change for 2010, but the basics fundamentals for these versions are still from the 1993. Okay, you can see there's just a tuberculosis and some other kind of. You can see there are some codes like at least it's still visible, and the codes are not mentioned here, but all of these items here, like there are different kinds of tuberculosis of different, for example, organs or so and so on. These definitely have different codes, yeah, and this is how it works. So tuberculosis is infectious kind of disease, and I'm just going to search for CD10. Going to CD. Okay, yeah, this could work. Okay, so you can see, for example, IC10 CM. Okay, there are different codes. Z stands for infectious disease. Yeah, so there are different codes for. So this is how it works. And ICD-10 codes are closer to DRG systems. I told you. You are using ICD-10 and for let's say explaining or simply the listing all of the possible diagnoses and symptoms such that the patient suffered from during his or her stay in the hospital. And using this, you are definitely going to know some of the diagnosis first. I'm going to remember it as far as I remember. For example, hypertension is I10, yeah. Going to it's just hypertension is I10. So because almost all adult patients has hypertension, so all of us, like all young doctors, know that hypertension is I10 because you know it. So you simply know it. because almost all adult patients have hypertension. So with I10 stands for hypertension, like essential primary hypertension. Okay, so it's just about untitled classification of disease. It's closer to daily practice, because you should know about the way that's ICD-10. So that's just the way how the DRG is coded. So these codes are provided to health insurance company. So it's necessary part of just how the system works. Again, there are more than several dimensions or many dimensions. So it's a kind of complex systems. One is SNOMED. SNOMED is something like a rising star around among the classification system, because it was something we just used in the past, but then it just stopped to use from some reason. I'm not sure why exactly, but I think that it was stopped to work from the reason that it was too complex. It was, for example, relatively hard to understand it, how the works are not so much easy to follow it or to understand the system. So I think it's simplified a bit, and it's used for let's say for describing or whatever situation in medicine, and that's a added value of the SNOMED. So it has 6 levels to describe any situation in medicine. Like it's abbreviated by its initial, like capital T, capital M, and so on. Topography, which is shortened by capital T, morphology by capital M, etiology by capital E, function by capital F, procedure by capital P, and syndrome and by combination of values of these 6 variables, these 6 dimensions, you can simply describe whatever situation would happen in medicine, or at least it's believed that it could be able to describe whatever situation in medicine, clinical medicine. So, for example, if you have as an example an abscess in kidneys around from Staphylococcus etiology with pain and resulting sepsis, and it was treated by nephrology. So this sentence is kind of story, which is its origin, just a form, topography or morphology of abscess in kidneys. Topography is in kidneys, morphology of abscess, arose from Staphylococcus etiology. So etiology is Staphylococcus infection. Function is that there was just pain and resulting sepsis. So syndrome is also pain and resulting sepsis. And procedure is simply that it was just treated by nephrectomy. So it could be uniquely coded using the following codes. So if we just pick the initials like capital D, capital M, and so on to capital S, these are the codes by which these values, like the kidneys in topography, they are just coded by 71000. And for example, morphology abscess is coded by 41710, and so on and so on. So there are just 6 dimensions like this, and by this codings you can simply define or describe almost whatever situation in medicine. So SNOMED is something which is slowly applied, slowly implemented in hospital and other kind of information system in medicine, as well as in the Czech Republic, and in Czech information system in Czech hospitals, because it's simply handy. It's simply handy because it's able to simply describe, or it's believed to be able to describe whatever situation in medicine. So this is about SNOMED, and this is also like the same. There's another example, which is excision of aorta. It's kind of pathology, Aorta is kind of just a simple topography. And the operation, procedure, excision, different kind of procedures, and so on. So these are the codes. You can see the codes here, and by this kind of tree-based decision making, you can simply get the code to, for example, you can simply combine these parts of words to get, for example, final, let's say, kind of sentence by which the situation, by which the case history of patient could be described. Yeah, so it works like this. I think it's not like, it's still not used, hardly used in practice now, but it's implemented. It's re-implemented, maybe it's better to say re-implemented. I think it's going to start very soon. because it's really handy. Because okay, it will be complex, but medicine is complex, of course. Medicine is complex, so we need to use complex systems, and definitely, for example, ICD is okay for using the coding of diseases. Why not? But you can still define. We can still describe this also by SNOMED. So it's just an abbreviation for Systemized Nomenclature of Medicine, SNOMED. And we can also describe something more as some extra aspects by SNOMED, not only etiology or diseases. Yeah, we can also, for example, code the procedure, which is like something which, for example, health insurance companies are interested in, and so on and so on. So good to know about SNOMED. And Scientometrics, another, let's say, another important component, which is good to know something about when you like to apply evidence-based medicine concepts in your daily practice. So Scientometrics. So science is just a field of simple kind of science, and it's focused on measuring, analyzing of scientific literature and scientific outputs. So what are just the common scientific indexes or metrics, let's say? So if just let's say the basic ones are simply the number of citations, impact factors, and H index, or also Hirsch index. So number of citations, it's easy to realize what the number of citations is. For example, we have, for example, a scientific document. It could be a scientific. Okay, we have many scientific documents, and all of these documents belongs to one author. So one author. So if you have simply sorry, okay, number of citations. Okay, I think there is just this error here. Sorry, because I think the number is not related to author; it's related to the document. So I have to correct this. So the correct version is that number of citations is just the number of how many times was just the given document. Scientific, it would be either scientific paper or, so for example, some kind of abstract or some scientific paper or some kind of chapter in some scientific book or something like this. So how many times this paper or chapter or other kind of scientific work was cited by other authors? Yeah, because it could be sometimes related also to how many citations got one given author. Yeah, it could also be supposed to be this, but I think that number of citations is simply related to one scientific work. So how many times was just a given scientific work cited by other authors so far? Yeah, from the publishing of the work until the time that until this moment, let's say. So this is the number of citations. So number of citations metrics, which is related to the to given scientific work, to one scientific document. Impact factor. So for example, typically to let's say to one paper, for example, one scientific paper. Impact factor is just an average number of citations per each of the papers of a given journal. So we have a journal, and usually a journal, for example, have let's say several types of volumes per year, and each one of these volumes, for example, include or contain, let's say, I don't know, 20 papers, something like this. So if we have, for example, 6 volumes per year, we have, it means that we have 120 papers in 1 year. And if we are just going to, so I'm just switch to this. Sorry, it means that if I'm just going to write down the numbers of citations for the first paper, like this, just to make it a bit clear. How does that work? I just wanted to make this. Okay, so C1 stands for the first paper, C2 for the second, C3 for the third one, and so for until C120. So we have 120 papers because we have 6 volumes multiplied by 20 papers. which means 120 papers per journal per year. Well, so if we realize what are the numbers of citations, so how many times was there the first paper cited, the second paper cited, and so on, the last paper cited, you can sum up these citations. So I is equal to 1 up to 120 and divide it by 120. Then this is simply the it's like kind of average. So I'm going to average all the numbers C1 to C120. So impact factor is like a kind of average number of how many citations you could expect one average paper in such a journal per 1 year. How many citations get one average paper, let's say, could expect to get? Yeah, how many times it could be cited by other authors, other journals. So impact factor is simply an average. It was defined by Thomson Reuters. This is what I told you, that impact factor was cited by was introduced by Thomson Reuters, and it's originally calculated per 2 years, because 1 year is sometimes relatively short time to get, for example, enough number of citations. It means that the impact factors will be relatively low. For example, it will just, for example, be so. For example, Nature could be like 150. 50, impact factor about 50, only about 50, or only about 25, for example. All the impact factors will be lowered to half, for example, by half, let's say. So 2 years is a better time period by which the impact factors are usually. Okay, so this should be usually multiplied by 2. Yeah, this is usually calculated by 2 years. So impact factor is usually calculated by 2 years, and sometimes also calculated by 5 years. And of course, 5 years related impact factor is the last one. Yeah, that's also the largest one. And then the 2 years impact factor, and of course it's usually higher than 1 year impact factor. And this is usually less. And this is just a point estimate. That's why I just made this kind of head above the IF aberration. It's a kind of point estimate of, as I told you, how many citations could a new paper published by this new paper published by this journal could expect in ongoing 2 years, for example, if it is just a level of 2 years impact factor. Yeah, but I suppose it's just a 1 year, so it's just a 1 year impact factor. So how many new citations could a given paper expect to get within the period of the one ongoing year? Yeah, something like this. This is impact factor. So impact factor is a property of a journal. Yeah, property of a journal. An H index, because we have, for example, we have three. Like we have 3 agents. We have author makes some papers, and papers are in journals. So we have these 3 pillars. So papers are simply measured by numbers of citations. Journals are usually in scientometry measured by or just compared by impact factors, and authors are compared by H index, also called Hirsch index. It's just all the lower metric, and it's defined as a maximal value of H such that the given author. This is a kind of tricky definition. The maximum value of H such that the given author has published H papers that have each been cited at least H times. What does it mean? It means that if we like to analyze what is the H index for a given author, we have to find out a level of H such that if the author has published H papers, each one of these papers should have been cited at least H times. And there is something like a okay, this should work. Something like a kind of plot which could try to, let's simplify the concept of H index. So let's suppose that we have an author, such as this author published 15 papers, The first paper, the most cited paper, was cited 17 times. The second paper, the second most cited paper, was cited 15 times. The third paper, paper number 3, was cited 14 times, and so on. So up to the last paper, which was cited only 1 time. And we would like to realize what is the level of H index of such a paper or such an author. So this author published 15 papers, and these are the numbers of citations for the individual papers. So we are searching for a number number H, such that there should be exactly H papers, such that each one of this H papers should be cited at least H times. So let's suppose that H is equal to 1. It would mean that there's one paper cited at least 1 time. Definitely, there are 15 papers cited at least 1 time, and we are searching for the maximum value. So 1 is not enough. Let's suppose that H is equal to 2. If there are 2, if the H index will be equal to 2, then there should be 2 papers, such that each one of both of these 2 papers should be cited at least 2 times. But okay, there are maybe okay, definitely there are many papers cited at least 2 times. 11 papers were cited at least 2 times. So 2 is not enough. And I'm just going to make this kind of let's say image, kind of derivation until I get, for example, to 4. Yeah, 4 papers cited exactly 4 times. Okay, there could be, for example, 5. There are exactly 8 papers exactly at least 4 times. Let's go to number 6. Okay, let's suppose that the H index is equal to H. It means that there should be exactly 6 papers cited at least 6 times, but there are 7 papers cited exactly at least 6 times. So 6 is still not enough. And now let's suppose that okay, we don't know. Let's suppose that H is equal to 7. So there should be 7 papers, such that each one of them was cited at least 7 times. Okay, there are 7 papers, but 6 of them were cited 7 times. That's okay. But the last one of these 7 papers, the most cited 7 papers, was cited only 6 times, and that's the problem, because it means that H index couldn't be 6. So one number, it will be versus number 1, this number minus 1. So number 6 is the H index, because there are at least 6. There are exactly 6 numbers, 6 papers, such that each one of them was cited at least 6 times, because 7 doesn't work, but 6 does work. 6 papers, such that each one of them was cited at least 6 times. So 6 is the H index here. Yeah, so it's possible, and this is like the way how it could be plotted, solved geometrically. Since we know that I'm just searching for H, such that there are H papers cited at least H times. I'm in fact searching for a square, yeah, because I'm just searching for a number H. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So there could be at this index there should be at least H citations. So I'm in fact searching for an axis of this first quadrant, or this quadrant of the first. This quadrant which is defined by these 2 axes. So this is a axis of this quadrant, and so there should be a degree of 45, the angle of 45 degree, and 6, 7. So there is like the axis is like something like here. So this is a degree, and so H is just the H index for this author. So this is how it could be realized what is the H index. And of course there are some online calculators how to calculate the H index. It could be, for example, done in an easy way, not in such, for example, manual way. We want to done online. maybe some more on the publication. I'm going to skip it maybe, or just only a few words about this. I think it's relatively easy. Maybe they are so much interested in this part with someone who will be interested. For example, if we are going to follow after the graduation at PhD study, but the process is like the following. So if you make up if you just made a um, article, journal article, or just scientific article, you can simply submit it, and the process submission you can do it usually anytime. Yeah, usually you should make a cover letters with 2 years details. Yeah, and okay, this is like the some, let's say, this is a middle risk background. This was just a how it works in general, yeah, but usually you can do it anytime, and you should include some cover letter, which is a kind of motivation letter, why your journal is important, or it could be important, and why it should be accepted by the journal. So then there's just a review style and format. If there are some great let's say confusions or some imperfections in style format, definitely is going to be returned to you, yeah, and you can do a submission. Then guidelines follows, and the guidelines follows, and the paper is registered for some reviews. Yeah, so this is like the possible branch if there are some style and form imperfections. Registration, review, technical review. If there are some technical review, means that there's just a plagiarism check. If there is like a plagiarism just is okay, so there are no suspicions of some plagiarism or auto-plagiarism, then there is just a notification status, and there are 4 possible outcomes how the result would be after this part. It could be accepted without any revisions. It's very rare. It happened to me one time. So it's very rare, absolutely rare. Acceptance with minor revisions. It's somewhat more common to get the paper accepted with some minor. It means that it is accepted, so it means that reviewers are relatively interested in your paper, but still there are some needs or requests to do some revisions. For example, we have to reformulate some, for example, several of your sentences, for example, make it more clear, or for example, to explain something a bit better, or things like that. For example, to change some of your plots to make it also a bit better, to explain it a bit better, and so on and so on. It could be still accepted with some major revisions. I mean that still the idea behind your paper is interesting, and it was just the reviewers were just maybe positively, let's say, surprised, and they were interested in your paper, but still you are supposed to do the major revisions. It means that your paper is okay, and very likely it's going to be accepted. Very likely it's going to be accepted, but major, it's still a plenty of work ahead of you to follow all the let's say all the remarks and all the let's say requests, what to do, all the revisions, some suggestions where you have to simply incorporate in your journal to, let's say, make your journal, just to work it out there. And unfortunately, the very often option or very often result of this kind of phase is just simply that your journal is rejected at this phase. Yeah, it's very common. I think it's maybe the probability to be rejected is maybe 80%. Yeah, it's relatively common to get your journal rejected. But considering that it's accepted with or without any revisions, you can incorporate the revisions, so redo all the things which are suggested to be redone, and resubmit your paper one more time. Then there are some comments, considerations, and so on, and you are notified. You are simply notified about the proofreading. So it's in other words, the last time you can make some small changes, small revisions in your camera ready versions. So in that part is usually called camera ready. Camera ready. So it was submitted as camera ready. Camera ready version of your paper means that it's submitted exactly in the way that you are satisfied. So that it will be just printed at the second of the submission. you are fully satisfied with the format and with the content of your paper. So it's called camera ready. So the proofreading is, if still there is something like a typo, for example, a typo in one letter, proofreading is exactly to reduce, for example, a rate of typos and so on. And then this is published online, indexed in the databases. As I told you, it's indexed in the, for example, PubMed. We talk about it. Your paper is going to be published in PubMed, and then we are divided. There is just, for example, final PDF, which could be, for example, be downloaded, or audience, or the expert committee of the scientific committee could be could get your work, finally get your work, finally get your journal. It depends. If it's just the open access, then it will be usually be downloaded. If it's just some kind of commercial access, you have to pay for it to get a PDF. I'm still wondering to give you some piece of information which is okay. I think you should know about it. Because there is just a definitely, because as you can see, science is going to be monetized very, very, very significantly. And I talk about PubMed, I talk about Elsevier, I talk about Thomson Reuters. So, but on the other hand, there is some kind of, I would say, it is not like a dark science. It's like kind of, I would say, kind of free science, or how to say it. Sci-Hub is something like how to get almost all journals all around the world without any subscriptions, or are paying any committees or commissions to get the access to the papers. Like sometimes this is supposed to be illegal, and maybe it is. But if you are just a, let's say, free minder, and you suppose that science should be open to all users of science, it is all researchers, all students, and so on, then you can use Sci-Hub. Okay, I'm not going to give you any directions. It's absolutely up to you, but I think that you should know about the Sci-Hub, because I'm not going to use it now. I'm only saying to you that there is a web page, Sci-Hub, which is unofficial, while the PubMed or Thomson Reuters or Elsevier or whatever are totally official. And many times, once you would like to have a paper from these pages, I showed you how to get the it was here. I showed you how to get the, for example, free text, free full text. But the number of free full text is very limited. There are tens of, like dozens of thousands of results which not include free full text. So you are not able to get these kind of full text papers without any commissions. But maybe it would work without any commissions using the Sci-Hub. So not any direction, not any commissions. Sci-Hub is something maybe you should know about it, because some our users still using this. And why not? If you are, as I told, if you are like a free minder, and you are just a kind of free thinker in this, and don't mind any kinds of, it could be kinda illegal to use it, because on some other pages like Elsevier and so on, there could be some commissions for get the papers. Yeah, of course, it's up to you. I think that you should know about it. Sci-Hub is like a open science. Maybe too much open science. Yeah, I don't want to judge it, but if you are going to copy a number of articles and like insert it in this text area, or DOI is a digital object identifier. I can give you a clue here. For example, we search for this article like this. This is a DOI, yeah. So okay, this one is open, yeah. This one is open. Since this one is open, I feel free to search for it on Sci-Hub, yeah, because this one is open. We know it, so it's not illegal. I'm going to search for it on Sci-Hub. Okay, like this one. Sorry, I just made a. Okay, but you can see that I got the paper. Yeah, you can see I got. So this is like not the yeah. Okay, Up to, it's up to. I didn't say, I think. Okay. And design of studies. I'm sorry, but I was able to do it for more than 2 hours. But you know what? I just started to talk about the studies in the very beginning. So what you should know about? I'm just going to make it very quickly. Or what is maybe maybe you know what, we can switch this. We can just simply move this topic to the next Monday, because I think this topic is closely related to the decision making, or maybe more related to this. So I can go to it. So maybe a few words until the 7:30. So design studies differ in their design, and the main we can for example consider several or distinguish several different designs. The main distinguishing between the design studies, the studies design, is just a let's say just a considering the experimental studies and taking out observational studies. The observational studies are only the studies where the subjects or individuals are only observed. So there is no action from the researcher, no action done from the researcher. On the other hand, the experimental studies suppose that there is some intervention of the researcher. Of course, there's some observation, which is similar to the observational studies, but there's not only the observation of what happens, but there is also some active intervention, proactive intervention of the researcher. So what does it mean? What is just a kind of, for example, allowed active intervention of a researcher? For example, it's just a, for example, dosing and applying of a pharmacological drug. This is definitely an intervention which could be done. Or for example, it could be, for example, some applying of some other kind of, for example, not only pharmacological drugs, but some other kinds of, for example, chemistries, which are believed to be like protective factors. And this is also something which would be allowed, which is generally allowed because ethical committee shouldn't have any problem with this. Well, maybe that's all. So drugs and some kinds of other treatments based on, for example, some kind of other ambiguities, and then, for example, drugs which are to be licensed. Yeah. So these are the interventions, because in history there could be many more kind of interventions, which, for example, will be acceptable for this time. Yeah, absolutely not. But nowadays, I think only the drug dosing, drug appliance, chemistry appliance, so this like allowed kind of interventions which could researcher do during the experimental study. Okay, so observation studies include 4 designs, and maybe a bit more than 4 designs, because I'm just going to go to this kind of this kind of schema. Because observational studies, not experimental, they usually they are based on the population, individual level. The population-based area simply analyze, for example, populations. So there could be some surveys or ecological studies. Surveys, simple surveys. So, for example, many of people are, for example, asked online or by some survey workers or whatever, and definitely the sample is not maybe selected, for example, representatively, would be this way. Ecological study has something like, for example, I have just a kind of example of ecological study here. This is a kind of typical kinds of ecological study. Ecological study is something which is relatively limited. If we are just going from the left to right hand side from in this schema, from left hand side to right hand side, then the validity usually increases. So the validity of descriptive studies and analytical or analytical ecological study is usually very low. So these are exactly the studies as I showed you here. They are somewhere here, like the case of editorials or the case of those studies. They are usually low, and so they are not so much valid, and their results should be let's say they could be accepted like the valid one, but rather not. Yeah, I don't know, because there are let's say objective limitations in this kind of study, and it's still the same from the bottom part of the schema up to the top part of the schema. The validity of the studies usually increases. Yeah, so ecological studies is the kind of maybe the sorry, okay, it's kind of kind of study which or design of study which is not so much valid. And why? It usually studies populations. So we have populations of different countries like New Zealand, USA, Canada, United Kingdom, Denmark, and so on. So many countries here. And this is just a two-dimensional chart. So you can see that all the points which are plotted here in this two-dimensional chart, they got two coordinates. The first coordinates, for example, horizontal coordinate stands for how many is the per capita daily meat consumption in grams. Because in New Zealand, usually an average guy in New Zealand got about, I don't know, 300 of grams of a daily meat consumption. Yeah. And still for the New Zealand, there is like the colon cancer incidence per 100,000 women. There's like, I don't know, maybe 60 cancer incidence in this amount of women here. Yeah. So it seems that if you are consider the shape of this cloud of points, it seems that there's just some kind of trend. So more per capita daily meat consumptions grams, the more or the higher colon cancer incidence per limited number of women. Okay, so this seems like the relatively strong claiming, a strong result of the study. So the ecology study, the first impression looks like, oh, there's like a very strong, very tight the relationship between per capita meat consumption grams and colon cancer incidence per some subset of some subpopulation of women. So the higher is the per capita daily meat consumption in grams, the higher is just the colon cancer incidence per limited number of women, or number of women in risk, or something like this. Okay, it looks like it should be a tight relationship, a tight linear relationship. For example, a line which could be, for example, fitting this bunch of this cloud of points. But what is the limitation of the study? The ecological study is limited by something which is called ecological fallacy, and the ecological fallacy is absolutely something you should know about. Why the ecological study is something which could be, for example, dedicated only some boulevard kind of newspaper, not to, let's say, a serious scientific work. Because, if we know that, okay, we usually using some kind of aggregated data, some kind of population data. Okay, we, for example, can get information about how many is the per capita meat consumption for these defined, or for these selected countries. Why not? It could be, for example, measures or it could be, for example, research somehow. And of course, we can do it from some kinds of, for example, national cancer registers or whatever, some the database we get the information. How many is just the colon cancer incidence in a given country, for example, in women in risk. Okay, we can get both the numbers, and we can get it. For example, I think that I can get both both variables. So number of meat consumptions in grams per capita on a daily basis, and both the colon cancer incidences for this for some number of women in risk. I can get these kinds of variables, these two kinds of variables in 1 hour. So I can get this kind of plot maybe in 2 hours. So it's rather quickly done science. And where is the problem? As I told you, ecological fallacy. What does it mean? Ecological study is limited by ecological fallacy. And ecological fallacy is the fact that if we know that, okay, New Zealand looks like something that there are people, or there are women, let's say, who consume meat for some higher level, 300 grams per day. And there is also a very high colon cancer incidence per 100,000 women risk. Okay, the absolutely fundamental problem in this graph is that we know that there are some guys who consume the meat on daily basis very high, in very high, at a very high level. Okay, and there are also some guys which let's say evinced some colon cancer, something like this. So there are people with some, let's say, who consume the meat at a very high level, and there are also relatively high amount of women which got colon cancer. But the problem is the ecological fallacy means that these two subpopulations, so the meat consumers and the colon cancer patients, could be two totally different subpopulations. So if we know that there is like a large amount of consumption of meat, for example, in New Zealand, and there is also, let's say, a large incidence of colon cancer. Okay, it could be, but there's absolutely no relationship or absolutely no causality between meat consumption and colon cancer incidence. So the problem of ecological study is that these two subpopulations are very likely totally different, and I bet my trousers that these women with just colon cancer, they, for example, they are just exactly the ones who don't consume meat so much, and and vice versa, the meat consumers, meat consumers, uh, here and at some levels and grams daily and so on. These people who consume the meat at such high levels, they are exactly the ones who, for example, are not going to get colon cancer. So these two subpopulations are totally different. So in other words, it means that there is absolutely no causality between these two variables. But this kind of plot is like silently suggesting you that there should be this kind of causality, but it's absolutely not. It could be absolutely not proven by population kind of data. It's kind of aggregation data because uh, this could be proven by, in fact, that for example, we got data sets uh, with for example, some defined sample of people, and we know for each people, for each guys in the data, we know how many, how much, how is the amount of his or her daily meat consumption, and if he or she just got the colon cancer or not. In such a case, it could be like maybe interesting to make some more research on this, make some ongoing research on this. But if we are using only population data on some national level, it could be that there's any more valid, any kind of valid outputs or results could be done by using this kind of plot. So these are like rather some kind of fancy plots. I remember that maybe 5 years ago on Facebook there was just kind of this kind of plot, like it was like a consumption of chocolate, and I don't know what was the other variables was something like a yeah, how many, what is your income if you are a low income or high income guy or something like this. And there was just a, there was just a Swiss, the Swiss country, and of course, like the income in, like the money income in Switzerland is absolutely high, within the Europe, in context of Europe, and like the consumption of chocolate is also very high. Yeah, so maybe I think there might be some maybe good for the plot. Yeah, that was maybe chocolate. Shana. Just Google for the plot. You can see it. I hope I'm able to see. Okay, maybe this. Okay. That's it. Perfect. I was able to find it. Oh yeah, okay. It's a kind of different plot, but exactly the same mess, information mess. Into uh, uh, to open it in Firefox, which we maybe kind of handy. Okay, that's the final size, but it doesn't matter. Okay. Another kind of ecological study, even more strange. Chocolate consumption versus Nobel rates per 10 millions of population. Okay, Switzerland. Okay, there is just a relatively high chocolate consumption. No surprise, very delicious Swiss chocolate there from there, and a number of Nobel rates is also relatively high in Switzerland. And also relatively the same for Sweden or some Scandinavian countries, and Italy for Germany, and so on, so on, so on. And yeah, I think that no one of us would just try to uh, think that there will be some causality, yeah. So between chocolate consumption and Nobel rates, number of Nobel rates per 10 millions of population. So this is even more like a more visible example of ecological fallacy. These data are population, these are also population, but of course there is, I think that there's absolutely no uh, suspicion that maybe some of the Nobel laureates was just liked or likes chocolate. Why not? But I think that there's absolutely no feasible there could be correlation, yeah, but there could be causation. It's implied sometimes, as it called, correlation doesn't imply causality. It's kind of doesn't imply something like this. I'm sorry for the typos. Correlation doesn't imply or causation 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 or causality. It's simply the same. Yeah, it's simply the meaning of this idiom. The correlation doesn't imply causation or causality. If we want, what is this example, which is which suffers from ecological fallacy, and this is also the example when this ecological study suffers from ecological fallacy. Yeah, these two variables are not related anyhow, only by some correlation. Yeah, by some correlation. Yeah, but they are not related by some causation. So this is important to know about. Yeah, maybe in okay. And there's just logic of some other okay cross-sectional study. If we have, I'm able to do it in 3 minutes. Cross-sectional study. We have just a sample population without any outcome. For example, like study population and sample population without. And part of this sample population without any outcome, they didn't have outcome so far. Some of this sample are exposed to some risky factor or some factor, single some factor, be risky or predictive factor, and the rest of this sample is not exposed to this risky factor or some kind of predictive factor or whatever. And the one which is exposed, they could develop the outcome, and the other part will not develop the outcome. The unexposed also could develop the outcome, and the other part, rest part, the remaining of them just no develop the outcome. And what we are interested in, usually calculate the risk of outcome in exposed group versus the risk of outcome in unexposed. So it's like the proportion of these four numbers. Like, it's going to switch to my tablet. So just so it's outcome without no outcome. Consider it's just not exposed. Sorry, just exposed. So these fields are exposed over outcome over not outcome in not exposed. If you are able to calculate this, something like a relative risk, yeah, or odds ratio, maybe odds ratio rather. So odds ratio, something which is called odds ratio. I believe that Dr. Klaschka talked about this in his lecture. The numbers of outcome in exposed sample, exposed power sample, number of not outcome, the same here. Number of outcomes in not exposed sample, subsample, and number of not outcomes in not exposed. So this is just absolutely the basic calculations we are just simply going to compare these four numbers, and the higher is the odds ratio, then it means the higher risk means the exposition to the factor, because the numbers of outcomes which were developed in this part of exposed subsample sample is just higher. So the higher risk ratio, the higher means that the higher risk means the exposition to the risk factor. And why this study is relatively simple. So it's not just not supposed to be very valid, because there's absolutely no time. No time. It's just done in like in a time snapshot. It will be done in 1 hour. Yeah, if we are able to get the documentation. So there's no time. What is the problem? There is no time. It's not like from this time point to this point. It's not like developing of outcome in just in some time. It's like, for example that suppose these two problems. We suppose that, for example, we can suppose that fat people could have, for example, back pains. Yeah, but what is the let's say exposition? What is the primary factor? What is the consequence? So what is the reason? What is the consequence? So as I told you, if we suppose that we have fat people, very fat people, it could be, for example, that fat people have, for example, fat people, for example, have a limited, let's say, limited possibilities how to, for example, move their body. They were also doing some sport and so, and that's why they result in some back pains. Yeah. So the possible reason could be that they are simply fat, but it could be also in the other direction. Yeah. So, for example, if they are simply they initially some back pains, that's why, for example, they stopped to do sports, some physical activities, and that's why they just could just gain some weights, and they became fat. So there is no absolutely there's no if there is no like time axis, there's no definition of time. We are not able to say what is the initial reason and what is the final consequence. And a good example is like the back pains versus, for example, like simply the obesity, let's say obesity versus back pains. What was the first? It's like something which is also sometimes called chicken and egg fallacy. Chicken and egg fallacy. What was the first? The chicken or the egg? Also good to know about. This is a kind like chicken and egg fallacy. Sorry, just maybe there's some typo. Yeah, chicken and egg fallacy. Chicken or the egg fallacy. Chicken or the egg fallacy is absolutely the main limitation of cross-sectional study. What was the first? The back pains of the people or the obesity of people? Were they firstly obese? So that's why they simply stopped to do any sports and so on. Or for example, they were limited to do some sports, so they do the sports ineffectively, whatever. So they started to have back pains, or the back pains were just the first, like the initial reasons. So the back pains, they for example immediately stopped to do any sports or physical activity, which got to some weight gaining, and they resulted into their obesity. So there's no time axis introduced, and that's why cross-sectional is also relatively limited by the fact that we have to deal with so-called egg versus chick versus egg fallacy. So ecological studies and ecological fallacy, cross-sectionalizing across chick versus egg fallacy. Then case and control study and cohort study. These are very similar, but in case of if we are considering the case and control study, we start at the moment that this is just also study. So this is time 0. It's just, for example, this moment. We start with the cases control. Cases have developed the outcome, controls have not developed the outcome. And we are going back in a retrospective way, back in time, to realize, to research where was the exposition. If it was just if the exposition exposure to the risky factor or some factor, for example, was let's say more common in the cases or more common on controls. It doesn't. It is this is just the what we are interested in. If the cases are D1, which were exposed, let's say, more often to some risky factor, or the controls are D1, which were exposed to some risky factor more. So we are going back to history, and that's why we simply need to use some, let's say, some hospital documentation or whatever kind of medical documentation. And you know that the limitation of medical documentation is that it's not, for example, so much precise sometimes. And for example, many of the detailed information could be missing in the documentation. So this is also some limitation. That's why case and control studies are still limited. Yeah, they are here. Cohort studies are far better. And why? Because they are not retrospective, they are prospective. So we have at the time zero, in the case of control study, we have cases and controls. But in the cohort study, we have at the time zero, we have exposed and not exposed. So initially, both of these groups are without the outcome. So the one which was exposed, like the time passes, could develop the outcome or couldn't, and still the same for the controls. They were not exposed, and like the time passes, they could develop the outcome or not. And in the end, we are just going to calculate compare the incidence. How many what is the incidence of the developed outcome in the exposed sample, and what is the incidence of the developed outcome in the not exposed subsample. We are going to compare it. So what ratio is used for cross-sectional and for case and control study. Like on the other hand, incidence risk or relative risk, they're the same, are like the incidence. So numbers of outcomes in numbers of outcomes plus numbers of not outcomes, they are exposed, divided by numbers of outcomes, divided by numbers of outcomes plus numbers of not outcomes, not exposed. So what is difference here? That there was just a proportion of number of outcomes to number of not outcomes, not D1, the guys who didn't develop the outcome, but this is like rather an incidence. This was something which is called odds, like odds. This is something which is incidence, so it's a relative incidence. So it's a proportion of two incidents, and this is used for cohort study, like a measure study. Okay, like this. Well, so cohort study is far more better than case study, even from the fact that it is more precise than odds ratio. But the main logic is that this one is prospective. It means that we are not we are not like we don't have to adopt all the information which are in medical documentation like this, because at this moment we have to go back to history and believe all what is written in the medical, because we can believe either the patients, which could, for example, forget to some important piece of information, or we have to believe the medical documentation. Both is limited, definitely. And if the at the very beginning, the time that the study onset is here, time zero is here, we are going prospectively towards the future, so we can make our own, for example, medical documentation, which is, for example, let's say, adjusted a bit towards needs and purpose of the study. So it means that it is far more better, far more valid, and that's why I see that the case control studies, the cohort study is relatively quality one, better than or more quality one than the case control study. And last slide is just from randomized control trials. The difference between cohort study and randomized control study is in fact only one important. This here at the beginning of the cohort study, we have a sample of people which were exposed to some risky or protective factor or some other kind of factor. And the other part, this other subsample of the people who were this is just people who were not exposed to the risky or protective factor. So this was done by the fact that some were exposed, some were not exposed. And usually the risky factor is something which we are not able to expose like by some research intervention. It was just done by some natural, let's say some natural events or situations. So the people just come to our study at the moment that they were already exposed to the risky factor, because we are not able simply to expose them like to make them to experience some risk, because it is absolutely ethical one to do it, because it's absolutely not able to do it. But in randomized controlled trials, we are able to we are simply limited to the predictive kinds of factors, expression of predictive. So it's rather means that interventions are rather about some application of dosing and application of some drugs, or dosing of some other chemistry which are not like the drugs, but still we're going to have patients with some, for example, defined disease. We do the random assignments, and as I told you at the very beginning of this lecture, the random assignments mean that we are able to, let's say, to distribute or to divide the distribution of the risky factors, and the risky factors could be known ones, or they could be also the unknown ones. And we are able to distribute in equal way all the risky factors, regardless of the fact that we are able to measure them, we are aware of them or not. We are simply going to distribute them equally likely towards the treatment group and towards the control group. And it means that these two groups, by the random assignment, this is guaranteed by the random assignment, they are totally equal within the meaning that once they are going to be exposed to some intervention, like for example some drug dosing and application and so on, we know that if they are just random assigned treatment or to the control group, the only thing or the only fact by which these two groups, so the treatment group and the control group, could differ is the application on the drug. So that's why it's called control. Control is a control group, and randomized, the fact that it's randomized means that by the randomization, the treatment and control group are exactly the same. They are 100% comparable until up to only one fact that they are different, in the meaning that some of them, the treatment group is treated by the, for example, drug, the new drug which is tested, and control group is not treated by the drug. They are simply some follow-up, and at the end is simply compare the results. So incidence, for example, of some, for example, how is the development of, for example, some parameters or the diseases, or if there is some, for example, if for example the parameters got better after the dosing of the drug and applying the drug, and so on and so on. So treatment and the randomizing is the aspect which is here like in advance, or just like a kind of extra aspect, which is like a difference between the randomized control trial and cohort study. Cohort study is also in perspective. So randomized control trial is also a perspective one, just starting at a time like 0, like it's, for example, it could be now, for example, at this moment. It goes to the future, simply similarly as a cohort study, but the exposition was just, for example, we just that the exposed people are, for example, have some other kind of risky, for example, behavior or something like this, and that's why they were exposed there. So these two groups could differ in two facts, in two things. The first thing is exposition versus no exposure, exposure versus no exposure. That's the first thing. The second thing would be that the reason why the first group was exposed to some, let's say, factor is that, for example, they just had some risky kind of behavior or something like that. So it means that if they got some kind of behavior, it could, for example, differ in some other kind of risky factors. So these kind of risky factors couldn't be distributed in an equal way into these both groups, because we couldn't mix the exposed ones with the not exposed ones. So the randomization was here done by, let's say, nature, by the fact who was exposed and who wasn't exposed. Here in this randomized controls, we do the randomization on our own. It's a part of the design of the study, and that's why we can simply we have it under our control. Okay, guys. It was like 3 hours long lecture. I was just wondering how I was able to do it. Are you still here, or just quitted my lecture? Guys, if there is any question, because I understand it was like a bit longer than normal. If there are some questions from your side, I believe that now it was like maybe very, it was just too many pieces of information at a limited time. It could be also some kind of like a exhaustive lecture for you. So I suppose that there are no questions at this time. But it will be. You are so kind. Thank you very much. You were all the time here with me, or not?
Yeah, most of the time.
I know. I'm sorry. Can you please give me some feedback on the lecture? I don't know if it was just maybe too much in detail, or too much, for example, on the skimming over the surface or whatever.
No, it was good, and I think the part that you show us about Sky Hub and the research things were gonna be really useful.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's. I wanted to tell you that there are some things you should know about, but it will be better to tell you this kind of stuff like in some face-to-face teaching, yeah, because there was just a recording. But as you could see, I just search only for just the freely available papers, so it was just because I don't want to do this kind of like on the fly, but this will be very handy for you. Okay, so thank you very much for your feedback. We are going to meet in 2 weeks. So if you're interested, I promise that I'm going to make the next lecture bit definitely significantly shorter, because we are going to talk only about the decision making, which is very interesting. There are some. It sounds like there is some mathematical stuff behind, but it will be relatively easily. So don't worry about it. Don't be scared by this initially, because I think it will be interesting for you. So how to like the motivation? Let's talk about the motivation now. Sorry. So you have a patient. The patient comes through, and for example, he or she had just simply a bunch of some symptoms, and for example, diagnosis is not, for example, so much clear. And in such a case, you have to start the diagnostic process and how to manage this diagnostic process. So what for example, how you should think about this? Yeah, what are, for example, the rules and the, let's say, advices or some regulations, how to, or hints how to, for example, handle this diagnostic management when you know about when the diagnosis is simply not clear. Yeah, this is important, and definitely I'm going to talk about some, I think, special things that we are not going to talk. I'm going to hear about them at definitely at any kind of different kind of subject. This study definitely not. So if you understand this, you are welcome. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. and let's
Thank
see in the
you.
next
Bye.
after 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have,
Professor. Thank you,
have a
Professor.
nice
Have a nice day.
have a nice 2 weeks. Have a nice evening, and see you to two
You too. Bye
weeks.
bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you.